Now, today, the February the 27th, marks 43 years since the death of the founder of the Pan-African Congress, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe. He's remembered for organizing and fighting against the control of people's movement through the dompas. His efforts culminated in the historic protests in Sharpeville, Soweto, and other parts of the country. To discuss his legacy further, we're joined now by the president of the Pan-African Congress, Narius Moloto. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. As we mark 43 years since the death of the founder of the Pan-African Congress, looking at the situation that the political dynamics that the country finds itself today, what do you think is the legacy that Sobukwe left behind that should be implemented at a time like this?
Thank you very much for having me this morning. Yes, it's true that we are commemorating and celebrating the life of a great man, great leader to ever come from our shore. Since he was born in Gauteng, he's the son of the soil. He's a man who is distinguished from others by total devotion and commitment to the cause of his people. He lived and died for that cause. Now, Sobukwe was a very principled leader who believed in the total freedom of our people, but not only that people should be free, but he defined that freedom in very clear terms. What should it mean? We are stuck at the point where he announced at that time, because today we talk of a capture. Sobukwe identified it a long time ago, where he says that people were no longer fully identifying with the aspiration and the needs of our people. And they are fighting against the taking of the total control of their country. Now, I think it's a true reflection, 26, 27 years into democracy today, that we have not moved an inch in terms of social progress and economic freedom.
And as we look to his legacy as a man who made tremendous strides in, building up to the liberation of the country, he was also a lawyer who believed and stood for human rights. As we recall that aspect of Robert Sobukwe, what do you think are some of the lessons that can be learned today?
Look, he taught us, particularly the leaders, but the people to love our country and our people and to work for that development, to plan for the future and to serve our nation. We defined all these things in very clear terms, that freedom and to us means leadership and education means serving others, particularly serving our people. Now, that is what is missing today. If we look as to what we did with the freedom and democracy, since we have attained it, we have not been able to direct it towards a total social development. We have not moved an inch from the social degradation that was experienced during the times of apartheid. And we have not made an inch to put the resources, to take control of our resources, to build our own economy. We have not built a single city that will manifest that we are free people. The cities that we still congested in are those that were built by the apartheid and colonialists when they were basically building infrastructure to serve the interest around the mines in the Rand and other areas. Now, it's against that where we say the party continued to come to your question. You continue to represent those victims of apartheid who were taken prison from time to time. You remember Justice Mokgoro, how she became a lawyer. You can tell the story of being represented by Sobukwe. And she was so surprised, and she began to interact with him in an interesting manner to say, hey, I wish you can have more men like you. And he said, why not you? That touched her and making to take law and become a lawyer and end up being a judge. Now, that's how Sobukwe touched the life of so many people, including the victims. I went to Kimberley and to Northwest, where I met quite a number of people that he have represented. They are still very much inspired by what they saw from these men, because they were victims largely around the diamond mines in the area.
Now, another man who says is a victim is former President Jacob Zuma, who wrote in his letter recently, he lamented in some parts that the system is treating him unfairly in the same way it treated Sobukwe. What did you make of the comparisons? Did you see or did you feel that there was enough substance for the comparison?
No, not at all. I don't think there's comparison between what's happening to former President Zuma and Sobukwe. Sobukwe was a freedom fighter, was fighting for the cause of his people, was principled, and was standing for a cause, was not in dispute with the state capture situation and the issues that our former president is entangled on with the authorities. Now, not totally not the same.
And you know, in this discussion of the comparisons made by the former president, what do you believe now is the position of the former president in comparison to Sobukwe? And perhaps the big question is, what would he have done in a situation like this?
Look, Sobukwe wouldn't have allowed people to be corrupt, to loot the state assets and resources to benefit themselves and their comrades. Sobukwe was dedicated to the cause of his people. You remember that he has many privileges offered to him to be a lecturer at Rhodes University at that time. He could have continued to lecture, but he chose to lead the PAC, to leave all distance, but also to lead the cause of freedom and independence for his people. Now, what he cherished was something bigger than his own personal interest and the interest of the family or of the small section of people. Now, for that reason, we cannot really come to where we are comparing the commitment and the leadership and Sobukwe himself to what we see today. We haven't, in our view, experienced and seen a leader like Sobukwe. I'm sure we'll see him in the next 100 years, because people like him, they do not repeat themselves within a short space of time.
And what do you make of one argument that says that Zuma was absolutely correct on principle of consolidating political and economic power to black people, as Sobukwe would have done?
As I've said, look, that's not true. That's not true. Sobukwe asked for total freedom and independence for his people, and that freedom we haven't seen as yet in this country. We maintained as the PAC. For instance, the freedom we fought for was the freedom where the dispossessed people regain their land, and they begin to develop the land and build the economy, an African economy that will advance the African people. But when we say the African people, we are very inclusive of all other people that find themselves in Africa and are willing to work for the development of the African people. Now, that's what Sobukwe stood for, and that has not happened. These people have had the opportunity to have political power, which was not used to advance our people from social degradation conditions. For instance, we found our people in the squatter camps largely living there permanently. Now, those people are inferior social condition compared to even those who are in the RDP and the formerly townships, where we rejected the four-roomed house. Now, today, they are luxury type of dwelling in the urban areas. Now, that is a shame. How do you then begin to bring that with Sobukwe? Today, the suburbs, where we present ourselves as free to the nations, other international communities, the people in the suburb and the people in the informal settlement who are stuck there, almost stuck there, because the state is bankrupt, it's been bankrupted by corruption. Those people, that means they are condemned to those positions forever and ever. Now, Sobukwe wouldn't have allowed the politicians and a party to put people in that conditions because he prioritized the needs and the aspirations both social and economic, of their people. And he taught us how to behave in that particular conditions. But let's look at the economic position of our people. Now, for 27 years, we've wasted time. What is it that we have built as a trajectory for economic development? The black economic empowerment and the legislative. Let's look into the stock market today, stock exchange. How many black companies are in there making impact? No, nothing. Nothing. Now, you cannot therefore tell me that there's a balance of power that was brought upon by a particular leader. These people have been followed by one policies that they are making in their own policy conferences, which has not moved this country an inch forward.
And if you'd allow me to interrupt you for the sake of time, as the Pan-African Congress stands today, do you feel that the party still resonates or perhaps carries forward the values of Sobukwe when it comes to being vocal on human rights issues and really being vocal on racism, leadership and the political dynamic of the country and where it's going? Do you feel that you still have a place and a platform and a voice to resonate the values of Sobukwe?
We do. Basically, the PAC has not changed from where. Well, he's a victim of coverage, of views and opinions, positions from time to time as they unfold. We are talking to ourselves, we end up propagating our views, express ourselves in social media than in the mass media. The mass media is isolating the Pan-Africanist, the original Pan-Africanist views. It's more try to propagate the diluted views. We have not changed our values. We talk as Sobukwe would have spoken. We are as vocal and critical as he would have. And our views and opinion and our outlook in terms of freedom and independence and in terms of social and economic development and freedom and being lost as a nation, the direction where we are supposed to. We're still firm there. Give us an opportunity, we'll show you. But also come to our programs and that we are carrying from time to time. Our people begin to see things with their own eyes. That was not the case 20 years ago. That was not the case 15 years ago. Therefore, we're making progress. People finding themselves and are beginning, they will find their way. As Sobukwe has indicated, that all what we are required to do is to show the light. People will find their way.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time, President of the Pan-African Congress, Narius Moloto, giving us a sense of the celebration as we look back to the commemoration and remembering Robert Sobukwe 43 years ago that he passed on.